You're listening to the Write Project podcast and radio program, a show about writing and modern Newfoundland author culture. This program is produced and recorded at CHMR FM 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and is aired on other great stations in the province and elsewhere in the country. It can also be heard online at www.chmr.ca. I'm your host, Matthew LeDrew. Welcome to a very special episode of the Write Project podcast. Today, we've got a host of authors on to answer one of the most frequent questions that's asked of any author. We're asking them, do you think someone can be an author if they don't feel emotions strongly? And today to answer, we have on copy director for Rogue Penguin Creative, Alicia Morrissey, award-winning professional writer. Alicia Morrissey, do you think someone can be a writer, or a creative person in general, artist or what have you, if they don't feel emotions strongly? Giggling like a crazy person. Okay.
Hang on. I think someone can be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly. However, I think they would have to be an exceptional observer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they would have to be able to not necessarily be empathetic, but be aware of the emotions that other people are displaying in given situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a writer that I work with at Engen Books. I don't know if you know him or not, Matthew Daniels, but he's very robotic sometimes. And it's interesting. He produces, he understands emotions, but kind of like the way Data from Star Trek does. It's interesting, but he's an excellent writer.
I assure you, he feels quite deeply about many, many things. He just does not wear his heart on his sleeve.
I believe that is true. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thank you very much. Next we have Carrie Cole, the amazing author of Rock, Paper, Sex and the newly released Rock, Paper, Sex Trigger Warning. Carrie Cole, do you think that someone can be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly, if they are not the heart on your sleeve type?
Well, 100% they could be a writer. They could write something that, oh my God, I don't know if you've ever read any Douglas Copeland, yes. And he's a fine example of a writer who is just fantastic and I met him once and I interviewed him actually when he was in Newfoundland and a number of years ago, 2007 or 8, I don't even know when it was now. And he had a show at the Rooms and I went to the Rooms with him and sat down for an hour and interviewed him, which for a reader was just amazing.
Oh yeah.
And, he's obviously a really fantastic writer, but he's kind of a prime example of someone who I would feel doesn't really fit into that heart on your sleeve category. And I feel like a lot of really fantastic writers that we all love and hold to great esteem are not like that. I think being able to look at something objectively and look at something without sentiment is very, very valuable.
Yeah, I agree. There's also very I don't know, there's part of me that always looks at as someone who's a voracious reader of everything but grew up on science fiction, a lot of science fiction is hard science fiction is just devoid of emotion. It is this is this technology, how does it work? This is how it works. Here's a 900-page user manual for a fictional device.
Well, there you go. And if someone wants to read that and loves it, then that's all that matters, right?
Yeah. Some science fiction is weird, man. I went through and I looked up a list of the greatest 100 in each genre. You know what I mean? Greatest 100 works of fiction, greatest 100 works of science fiction, greatest 100 works of fantasy. And that became my reading list for a while. I wasn't reading new stuff. I was immersing myself in the classics of each genre. Yeah. And some of sci-fi, man, is weird. It's it is like that, where it's what? There are no characters in this book. What are you doing?
So I'm I read a lot as much as I can. I always have. And I am not I'm not a snobby reader at all. I will read anything.
Yep.
I obviously have genres that I kind of gravitate to, but books, and I'll try any type of book, but science fiction is not one that I've gotten into, I gotta say. So if I was going to read one science fiction book, what would it be? For someone who is not into science fiction, what would you say to me? I will read it. I will read this book. If you tell me to read it, I will.
Okay, if it's only one and it's science fiction, one, Flowers for Algernon.
Flowers for who and the what?
Flowers for Algernon.
Okay. How do you spell that last word?
Algernon, I think.
Okay, I can find it from that. Okay.
Yeah. One of the most famous books of science fiction, to the point where most people don't consider it science fiction, but it was on that top 100 list, and it is the best. There's a friend of mine that reads voraciously, reads a book a day. And again, like you, wasn't much into science fiction. And we're talking one day, and she asked me the same thing, and I brought this up, and she said she'd never read it. And I looked at her and said, I'm not one to, for hyperbole, it's the greatest book of all time. And she's like, you're lying. That's ridiculous. And it turns out her husband had the book, it is one that he had owned and read before, and said, no, he's correct, and gave it to her. And she called me crying the next day. She was like, I couldn't put it down.
I'm looking it up right now.
Oh, yeah.
Just to see. I will read this. If you say it is as someone who goes into science fiction being like, okay, I'm going to read this, and kind of is a little skeptical at the beginning.
Yeah.
I will read this. Oh, it's a film too.
Oh, I wouldn't go with the film.
No. No.
Yeah.
Okay, no. Hello.
No. Yeah. Same thing
I'm not
with.
Gonna do that.
If you like it and you want a second, the second is always Time Traveler's Wife. But again, the book, for God's sakes, don't watch that movie.
I watched the movie a long time ago. I haven't read the book, but yeah, I'll read this one.
There you go. Good. Let me know what you think.
Yep, I will.
All right.
I'm going to put it on my Amazon list right now.
Next on the line, we have Josh Connors. Connor or Connors?
Connors.
I thought so, yeah. Josh Connors. There's two of them, apparently. No. He is the author of Small Town Queer, both the play and the adaptation, novel or play or whatever you want to call it. Josh Connors, do you think someone can be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly?
Yes. I think it's similar in many different art forms. Most of the actors that I know who I've grown up with or worked with through school and, have become good friends with, we're all very heightened emotional people. But the beautiful thing about writing or creating your own work is you can create something you're not feeling, or you can take something that you don't feel too strongly about and blow it up and make it a much bigger thing. So I think as long as someone has the imagination and creativity to create those emotions on paper, I don't think it's as important that they feel those on the same level.
Okay, I got you.
I'm sure it's helpful.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Thank you very much. Next we have Daisy Jefferies, the author, the amazing author behind a lot of different work that's come out of this province recently. She was featured in TransVersing. She was featured in Land of Many Shores, edited by Ainsley Hawthorne, both from Breakwater Books. And blessedly, she was featured in Acceptance, Stories at the Center of Us from Engen Books. Daisy Jefferies, what do you think that someone can be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly?
I mean, I guess if you put words on a page or on a screen or whatever, you are engaged in the act of writing. What that work, the function of that work, will work itself out. If it's meant to have an impact, it will. And if it doesn't, it won't. So I don't know if there's good or bad writing. For me, there's an impossibility of writing without emotion, and the embodied language of the self. And so, writing in my life has always been an emotional link between the way I'm positioned in the world as a white settler, as a trans woman, as a sex worker, within the larger cultural and political landscape in Newfoundland and Labrador. There's no way to interrogate issues of gender or sexuality without emotion in this context, I don't think. But there are certainly ways to, write about other things without emotion. I think there are a lot of journalistic forms that don't necessarily carry emotional weight, offer intellectual weight. But I'm tired of reading dry writing, and that's just my own preference. So, I mean, yes, you can be a writer without emotion, but the function of the work will decide itself.
That's true. And even when I read journalistic stuff, there's a little part of me that really misses Hunter S. Thompson. Not that everything he wrote was gold, but that idea of like, no, I'm a part of the story. I'm here. Let's go. You know what I mean? That like, no, it's more personal essays. I was there. This is what I felt like. That kind of gonzo journalism that does attract me a little bit, like
Right.
where there is emotion to it. I mean, in that sense.
For me, writing is a living art form, right? So bringing the way that imagery, the way that poetics, the way that emotionality are figured within that work are central to the craft of writing. Um, and I think there are institutional barriers on forms of writing as well, what writing can and can't be. So when emotion is, if we look at the Western canon of enlightenment, where there's emotion on one end of the spectrum and rationality on the other end of the spectrum, there's a lot that goes missing, and there's a lot of harm within that framework. So I'm tired of the conversations about rationality and intellect, and I think the only real social change, comes from writing that resonates and moves other people.
See, this is why I was hated when I was in Memorial, because I have to, anytime something very, very smart like that is explained to me, I have to translate it into language that my weird nerdy brain can understand. So you said a very, very brilliant thing, like, oh, the spectrum of like the emotional and the rational and stuff like that. And in my head, I went, got it. Kirk over here, Spock over here. And that's how my brain interprets it.
Right. These larger conversations about fact and feeling, and I don't think there's always a dualism between fact and feeling, right? I think there's a lot of damage that gets done when that kind of narrative is upheld. So
Yeah.
More emotion, please.
Yeah, I agree. I like it. Love it. Okay. Thank you very much. Next on the line, we have Kayla Krantz, who's calling in from Detroit. She's originally from Houston. She writes the Rituals of the Night series. Kayla Krantz, do you think that someone can be a successful writer if they don't feel emotions strongly?
I think so, because I've always had trouble like relating emotions and kind of connecting to other people, but I think through reading other people's work, I understand emotions a little bit better so that I can put them into my own books.
That's good. Okay, good answer. Good answer. Thank you very much. Next we have Shannon Faye, the wonderful author behind Innate Magic, the first book of the Marrowbone Spells series. Shannon Faye, do you think it's possible to be a writer if you don't feel emotions strongly?
I mean, gosh, I can't speak for other writers, right?
Yes, you can.
It's
always that's the point of this interview.
Yeah, all right. I would think yes, because I think there are lots of people who are good at, like breaking down other people's motives and machinations without being that kind of passionate themselves, right?
Yep.
And I think that can lend itself well to writing. So I don't necessarily think that you yourself have to be dramatic in any sense, right? To write
Okay.
drama.
That's true. I like it. And I also always think of authors like Arthur C. Clarke and stuff like that.
Yeah.
People who specialize in more, I don't want to say dry because that sounds bad, but like things where the emotions divorce from.
Yeah.
Pick your style.
Yeah, no. I do think people who are all about breaking down the big ideas. I'm a big fan of the Chinese author Xian Lu, right?
Okay.
He wrote The Three-Body Problem and its sequels. And those books, I've met people who kind of hate those books because they can't get into the characters or necessarily the plot, but the ideas that are presented so mind boggling. I love it. Yeah.
That's true. I read a lot of nonfiction, like and stuff like that, and it's almost better in those cases when the emotion of the author's taken out of it, because it's like let's be objective here. Let's look at anthropology texts and stuff like that. I like.
Interesting.
Nice. I travel through books, kind of thing.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you very much. Next, we have on Heather Reilly, author of The Binding of the Almatraic series, coming soon from Engen Books. Heather Reilly, do you think someone could be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly?
I would have to say yes, because not experiencing something yourself doesn't mean you're bad at writing it.
That's fair.
Like, a lot of my books are set in medieval times or pirate days, and obviously I was not alive back then, but I could do enough research to do justice to the time period.
That's an interesting point, because that's almost the genre lit fiction divide from what I've heard of the lit fiction standpoint, where it's like, how can you write pirate fiction authentically? There's a certain side of the writing community who thinks that, like me being a male from Newfoundland, I should only be writing about the male experience of a Newfoundlander, which is limiting.
It really is, especially in today's day and age when you can literally be anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because not everybody identifies with being their birth gender, for example.
That's all very true. Yeah, no, I wouldn't even think about it from that point of view, but it's more the imagination thing, where it's like, you're in a medium that requires imagination.
Yeah.
Why are you limiting it? It also feels fairly, like, I get this a lot living in Newfoundland, from other writers in the lit community in Newfoundland.
Yeah.
But I'm like, funny, nobody gets mad at Robert J. Sawyer for writing sci-fi. Like, he's allowed to because he's a mainlander. I can't because I'm just a Newfoundlander.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, too, it really depends on what kind of a job you're doing to fill in the gaps you might have.
Well, that's very true. I am a horrible writer, and if they picked on that...
You're a horrible writer.
If they picked on that, I'd be like, oh, absolutely. Like, if only they would say, you're a bad genre writer, instead of just saying you're a genre writer.
You're not a bad writer, though, at all, no matter the genre. But, I don't know how different I am compared to other authors. I know I've been looked at strangely by some because of the intense amount of research I do.
Interesting.
But I'll do 3 hours of research for 1 hour of writing.
That's intense.
Just to make sure that I don't, where I'm writing in the 12th century, or 13th century, 1200s, I don't want to mention something that doesn't exist yet.
Like that time you posted a book with a telephone in it that was based in the 1300s?
Never. But today, I had a guy putting gemstones in his pocket, and I had to stop myself, and I had to go do a bunch of research, when were pockets invented? When were they widely used?
I would never have thought of when were pockets invented.
Yeah. See, that's what I mean. I research everything so I don't accidentally, because I love history, but I also have friends who love history, and there are some people I know, you can't watch a medieval movie with them because they pick it apart, oh, that person had keys or something, they pick, you know what I mean? And it stops them from enjoying it. So I don't want to put a block on anybody enjoying my stuff.
That's fair. I also think that whatever your specialty is, that's the worst thing. that to try and enjoy fiction from. Like, I can't watch shows about writers because I get very like, oh, look, it's an alcoholic writer. How original. I'm gonna just sit here and grit my teeth. Oh, look, someone's playing a writer and they're playing it like they're Stephen King. Wow, we're all just like that.
It's funny because when you said alcoholic writer, I was like, oh, Stephen King.
Yeah.
He's my favorite author, though.
Oh, he's one of mine. Yeah, no, I adore Steve. But yeah, that is a trope for a reason. And thankfully, he got over that part of his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a trope for a reason. And part of it, the reason it's a trope, isn't even that he suffered from that. It's that he explored his suffering in his writing.
That's right.
And his writing was some of the most popular stuff in the 80s and 90s, still today, and he populated it with alcoholic writers, and that was how he kind of dealt with his stuff. Yeah. So it's this double-edged sword of, like, you can't even say that, like, people were making fun of him, because it was him. Like, he's responsible for this trope himself.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, like you're right, there are a lot of people who, you know, I had a friend who was a fighter, like a
boxer.
Yeah, kickboxing actually, but yeah, you couldn't watch action movies with him.
Yeah,
he'd get very intense. I've been watching this series on YouTube called Stuntmen React, and it's stuntmen reacting.
I think I've seen that actually.
To bad stunts in movies.
Yeah,
and they pick apart certain scenes that I'm like, I don't even see what you're seeing, and they'll sit there and explain it, and it'll be like a bunch of ninjas attacking one guy. But the ninjas that aren't attacking right now are just kind of paused.
Waiting
like,
for their time!
Waiting.
Yes! I've seen that episode!
Yes! And I'm just like, oh, I never would have seen that kind of thing. But yeah, I think on one level you're absolutely right to do research. But on another level, I think that if anyone out there has an extreme expertise, realize that maybe fiction about that expertise isn't for you. Like...
Maybe, but
it's
like
weird, like
I love medieval stuff. Like to this day, like it's my heart and soul in a lot of ways.
I'm always shocked, like when doctors like to watch House, for instance. Like I know one doctor who likes House MD,
actually,
and the rest are like, what?
It's funny you say that because my sister's husband, my brother-in-law, is a doctor, and when he was in school, in med school, they made them watch Grey's Anatomy and House and stuff like that.
Just to have a laugh.
No, you know what it is? It was actually to give them an idea of the truth and fiction of the inner workings of the hospital.
Sure.
So for House, it was the diagnoses and stuff.
Yeah.
And for Grey's Anatomy, it was the personal relationships between staff.
Yeah.
Although sex in the on-call rooms apparently don't happen that often.
Yeah, no. the door doesn't lock.
And all of the doctors aren't so good looking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is why the first thing doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, lights out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really interesting. I don't know. I always find that, like, people should realize that when they have an expertise that, like, it's fiction. You know what I mean? That, like, in the other fiction they enjoy, like, you might be a doctor and, like, nitpicking this thing about doctors.
Yeah.
But then you watch a legal drama and you have no clue. You're just enjoying it. And you have no clue about the millions of things you're missing.
Yeah. But that's one of the reasons I don't write in real places.
Yeah.
Like, every novel I write, even, like, it doesn't matter. I'm working on a dystopian novel that I've been working on for 6 years. And, like, I want to finish it when I'm done my next book.
Sure.
But even that, I'm not placing any of it in real locations because I just don't have time to do that kind of research. I'm already doing so much other research.
I really like it when a novel set in the future really misses the mark. Like, it's always like, oh no, you thought this wouldn't exist in 100 years and it existed in 5.
Or the other way around, like Spaceballs. If you think of Spaceballs, the movie, Princess Vespa takes off in like a 1920, or no, it's already passed. It was like a 1984 Mercedes, and it's a flying car, spaceship.
Yeah.
Right? Like 20 years ago. And they thought that would be a thing. Like,
yeah, I think Spaceballs might have been a satire.
Well, duh.
I didn't see it.
What?
Yeah, no. I've never seen it.
We need to stop filming right now and watch this.
I've actually never seen a Mel Brooks film.
Okay, Spaceballs is the best one.
I have seen Blazing Saddles, and that kind of made me go,
no.
Oh, no.
No. History of the World Part 1 and Part 2, I don't know, was better. But, like, Spaceballs is the best one. You gotta see Spaceballs.
Thank you very much. Next we have Lily McCarthy, the amazing author of Quick Bright Things, the newest lesbian romance novel from Engen Books. Lily McCarthy, do you think that someone can be a writer if they don't feel emotions strongly, if they're not like hard on their sleeve type?
Absolutely. Fiction is fiction. You know, you can make anything up and it can be believable. People are like, this man who wrote Star Wars never was in space.
That's true.
I couldn't have said that word. But I mean, fiction is fiction. You don't have to have experience to write a thing, even though experiencing stuff makes it easier to write the thing.
Yeah, for sure. Good answer. Okay. Thank you very much. Next we have an author from House of Zulu. She recently just put out her novel Phreak. It is J.E. Zolo. J.E. Zolo, do you think that someone can be a writer if they don't feel emotion strongly? If they're not in, like, if they don't feel emotion strongly?
Of course. I mean, the one thing I learned about what is a writer, and it's simple, a writer writes. And it took me a long time to realize this. I was writing, and I'm like, am I a writer? When can I call myself a writer? And then I realized, I'm a writer because I'm writing.
It's the only job there's no application process for.
That's right. And if you are a writer, maybe you're not a good writer yet. Maybe you're, a novice writer. Maybe you're a bad writer, but, you're still a writer. So,
there are bad doctors out there, but they're still allowed to call themselves doctors, at least for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you write, you're a writer.
Yeah.
So just to let everybody, I've already done that work. I've already figured that out. If you write, you're a writer. You can call yourself a writer.
Fair.
But you might not be any good, but you're still writing, so you are a writer.
Yeah. But nobody might pay for your work, but you're still a writer.
Yes, and the difference is then when someone does pay for your work and publishes it, then you're an author.
Yes.
So you're a writer until you become an author.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, a writer writes, so if you're writing, you're a writer, baby.
Thank you very much. Next we have Lisa Timpf. Do you think that someone can be a good writer if they don't feel emotions strongly, or if they don't understand emotionality?
I think they can. The one book that I read, A Diary in the Age of Water, a lot of that was kind of factual. Yes, there was emotion in it, but I think there's certain books that could be more factual that you wouldn't necessarily need the emotion, or the emotion would come across to the reader anyway. Like, say, for example, The Martian by Andy Weir. Like I'm not saying he doesn't understand emotion, but the nature of that story, just telling that story, you would get enough across that a person could still enjoy reading the story.
Yeah, no, that one very much relies on very standard hero's journey. Like, here's the person, there is a problem, keep trying to fix that problem.
That's right.
New solution, and he won,
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next we have Jennifer Shelby, who is an Atlantic Canadian author. You've heard some of her work before. Her short fiction was featured on an episode of the Right Project podcast, where she allowed us to play it in its entirety, the audio presentation of The Sea Lion, the Witch, and the Universe, to much acclaim. She's got her own novella out now, the 5th book in the Slipstreamer saga from Engen Book, called Plague of the Dreamless. Jennifer Shelby, do you think someone can be an author if they don't feel emotions strongly?
That's intriguing. I mean, they could certainly write characters that don't feel emotions strongly, and I would love to read it. But I don't know. I think you can train yourself to do a lot of things, though. Like, if you don't feel strong emotions, but you read heavily and you know how to work emotions, even if you don't feel them, I think you could pull it off. But I certainly think it would be a lot more challenging.
All right, well, thanks for coming on again. For all of you, we'll be here again next week at 4:30 Newfoundland time or online at chmr.ca. Please tune in and we'll talk more about writing culture in Newfoundland.